Welcome. We're so glad that you're here to our first ever virtual trending topic. We're from Refuge Church. We're a Seattle located in Capitol Hill, and we are so glad that you're here. We have 3 core values, which are gospel centrality, unconditional friendship, and sacrificial service. Part of our sacrificial service is our partnership with World Relief, and we're so excited to share that with you today. I would like to introduce my co-host, Colette, from the Washington Conference with you now.
Thank you. I am Colette Newert, the Director for Outreach Ministries at the Washington Conference. And that is a family of ministries that includes prison ministry, disaster response, and community services. And our motto in our work is to mobilize people to transform communities. So I am so grateful. Thank you, Lauren, for having me with you and to learn about this really important work that's going on and how we can get involved.
Yeah, the purpose of this event today is to create awareness of immigrants and their needs in the community, to create awareness about how Christians can serve the vulnerable, and how our churches can get involved in this process. Just to give you an outline of how the event will go today, is we will introduce our 2 speakers, we'll hear from them, we will hear about how to get involved, and then we'll have time for questions and answers. So if you have any questions at all throughout the process, please feel free to put them in the chat. I would now like to introduce our speakers to you. We have Chitra and Santa from World Relief Seattle. Chitra is our executive director at World Relief Seattle and has years of experience in the industry. Santa is an employment specialist and in charge of our ESL, and she is herself a refugee and will share her personal experience with you. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Chitra.
Talk about World Relief and the work that we do with refugees. And I have the privilege of leading one of the most dynamic and innovative teams, I think, in this work. And our vision at World Relief, I think in our first slide, you'll see that our vision is that every refugee and immigrant is welcomed by community, rooted in community, and empowered for community. And as you'll hear from Santa tonight, our employment manager, she, having been a refugee herself, you can see that part about empowered for community. Well, World Relief, we have about 50 staff, and we have 5 programmatic pillars. And I'd like to take you through those in just a second. But many of you might be wondering, what is a refugee? What is the definition of a refugee? Well, I think we have some slides that are going to be coming up here in just a second, and that'll give you a good, there we go. Yeah, so if we go down to the definition, the 3rd slide, just bear with us for just a second. So the definition of a refugee is a person with a well-founded fear of persecution and who has crossed an international border. So for example, if we're in Seattle and we know that somebody is coming to hurt us, and because of our political or our religious beliefs, and we decide to go to Spokane to wait out the danger, well, we would be called an internally displaced person. Now, if we crossed over into Canada and crossed an international border, we would be classified as a refugee. So that is the definition of a refugee. Is the next slide, please. And this persecution that you experience has to be based on race, religion, nationality, membership in a social group, or your political opinion. As of now, unfortunately, natural disasters and climate change are not classified under the refugee classification. This is some of the advocacy that we do at World Relief, trying to get that protection of refugee status for those that will be displaced as a result of climate change. They're estimating that there will be millions of people that will be displaced due to climate change in the coming years. Next slide, please. Now, there's a difference between a refugee and an asylee. And an asylee is a person who meets all the definition of refugee, but is already in the United States or seeks admission at a port of entry. So, for example, if in that example that I gave you about someone coming and you're in danger, either you're going to Spokane, you would be considered an internally displaced person. So that's an IDP. If you go to the Canadian border and cross over, you'd be considered a refugee. But if you know that the fear is imminent and you go to Canada and you throw yourselves at the mercy of the Border Patrol and ask them for sanctuary, you would be considered an asylee. And oftentimes, asylum seekers are in detention or put in a detention facility like the one that we have in Tacoma. And those are usually privately run. Next slide, please. Right now in the world today, there are 26 million refugees. And as you see, there's 45.7 million IDPs, internally displaced people, and 4.2 million asylum seekers. And this population, the 26 million, just for a reference, quick reference, that is the population of Australia. And there's 26 million of our fellow brothers and sisters living in this purgatory, in this limbo of not knowing if they can go back home, definitely not being able to go back home, but also not knowing if they can move forward and get citizenship and safety for their families. These folks live in camps sometimes they live in the general population. The average time in a refugee camp currently is between 14 and 17 years, almost a generation. So when you think that 40% of all refugees are children, just imagine having to grow up your entire life in a camp. That's the joy of what we get to do, is that we get to welcome those that come to the United States as refugees and welcome them to safety and long-term thriving here in the US. Next slide, please. So as you can see, the US refugee admissions has gone up and it's gone down. When the program was first initiated in 1980, that was under President Reagan. We had 200,000 refugees admitted into the United States. Depending on what has happened, I mean, we have a ceiling that the Congress, in that Refugee Act of 1980, there was, I'm sorry, not a ceiling, a floor that was set of 50,000 refugees. But as you can see, in the last 4 years, it has dropped drastically. When I came to World Relief 4 years ago, we were welcoming well over 1,200 refugees into our office in Kent. This last year, as you can see, the drop, precipitous drop, we only were able to welcome about 380. And nationally, the World Relief Network, when I started 4 years ago, we had 26 offices across the country. We have closed many of them. We're down to 14 offices. And that's just not World Relief, but the other voluntary agencies that welcome refugees have all had to close multiple offices across the country. The infrastructure has been decimated for welcoming refugees. So we are in the process of building back up now under the new administration. Next slide, please. So as you saw before, I mentioned we have 5 programmatic pillars. The first one is welcome services, and that includes everything from meeting folks at the airport when they arrive, to ESL classes, to help with getting that very important first job in the United States, to wraparound casework, to walk with those families in their first few months in the country. Next. And the second pillar is next generation. We call it Next Gen. And this came about, we ran 13 focus groups with the community 4 years back. And we asked them, what are we missing? What else do you need? And every single parent that we talked to in those focus groups said, we're fine, but our kids, please, our kids need help in assimilating and getting used to the culture. Please step into that space. And so we did. And 4 years ago, we started a summer academy. It's academically rigorous, and it's for newly arriving refugee children. And we keep them at grade level. We also give them lots and lots of love and care and tools to navigate this culture. We also started a family literacy class for the little ones from birth through kindergarten. We teach their caregivers, their parents, along with the little ones, and we do pre and post testing. And what we found is that these kids are not only growing in their English language ability, but their fine motor skills, their gross motor skills, their ability to socialize has all improved drastically. Finally, for the high school age kids, we have an environmental science internship in our community garden. And for 18 to 25-year-olds, we have a mentorship program. Next slide, please. We also have a legal clinic. 4 years ago, we had a part-time staff person, but again, through those focus groups that we did, we heard from everybody that they really wanted a more robust clinic in the South King County area where our office is, where most refugees and immigrants now live. We now have the most robust legal clinic in the South End with 5 full-time folks that do work either pro bono or what we call low bono, so below market rates. And we do everything from helping people with citizenship applications, green cards, the Violence Against Women Act, and then family reunification. So it's a very fulfilling service that we get to offer clients. Next slide, please. So the fourth pillar is economic empowerment. Our women especially said that they wanted ways to earn supplemental income to feed their families. Now, of course, that very first job in the US is also under this pillar, but we were given an acre of land, and it was a parking lot. And we asked the community, what do you want? And many folks had come from agricultural backgrounds and were food insecure. We're in the middle of a food desert. And so we depaved that parking lot and put up a community garden with 50 garden plots. And we have 50 families from 22 countries that farm with us now. And this garden is not just a community garden, it's environmentally friendly. It's the largest example of green stormwater infrastructure in the entire King County area. And the King County School District uses it to teach kids about environmental science as an outdoor classroom, and teachers are trained on environmental science here in our garden. So it's really exciting to see that. And then we also have a sewing class for refugee women, and we teach English through sewing. And finally, this something that I'm super excited about is this coming year, we're going to be opening an entrepreneurship academy, a commercial teaching kitchen, and support services to existing immigrant businesses. And keep your eyes on these slides because pretty soon I'm going to tell you if any of these pique your interest, we're going to tell you how you can get involved. Okay, next slide, please. And finally is spiritual care. And this is what we do at the Immigration Detention Center in Tacoma. And we found out 15 years ago that folks were being denied their civil liberty to congregate and practice their faith. Many of the people inside don't have access to spiritual care, and they are people of faith. And so what World Relief does is we act as a facilitator. So if there's a group inside that speak a particular language, we'll find a pastor that speaks that language and we'll go in and lead a worship service. So every weekend, there are 8 services that World Relief runs. We also do outside services, which is window visits, and we disciple folks through the window visits, the folks that run the Bible studies inside. But through our advocacy, there's also now folks that are Muslim. There's an imam that goes in, a Jewish rabbi, and a Catholic priest, and a Sikh priest that all go in and run services as well. And I think that's the last slide about World Relief. And what I would like to do is introduce someone that is one of my colleagues, somebody that I admire greatly, and a woman that I am so privileged to call a friend. Santa Pradhan is our employment manager. She, as I said, has lived experience as a refugee, and she does a fantastic job of leading her team in employment. So I'm going to hand it over to her, and I think it's important for you all to hear a story, because I've been talking in kind of, large, big things, but like Santa's going to tell her story of how she was resettled by World Relief. Thank you, Santa.
Yeah, thank you, Chitra. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share my story with you all today. So my name is Santa Pradhan. I'm a former refugee from Bhutan. My family and I fled the persecution in homeland of Bhutan in 1992. So Bhutan is a small, beautiful country surrounded by Himalayas. It's close to Nepal and India. So in 1988, the Bhutanese government decided to expel its citizens of Nepalese origin and started the census. So Nepalese has been living in Bhutan since 1620s. So my great-grandfather was a craftsman. He was one of the many craftsmen commissioned by the king of that time to build a stupa in Bhutan. So people who were not able to produce the residential status got expelled from the country. So, however, many people who had a proper documents, Bhutanese passport, like my father, who kept every pieces of documents since 1930, was asked to leave the country within the 3 days. So people who were resistant to leave the country paid the price of their life, and many of them ended in the jail. So on the 3rd day of the government notice, we left Bhutan and we made our way to a refugee camp in Nepal, which was already set up by the units here when the displaced was happening in Bhutan. So I grew up in the refugee camp. As Chitra was mentioning before, that many children had grew up in the camp. And here I am, example, I grew up in the camp. I have more memories of the refugee camp than of my own motherland. There was scarcity living in the camp. There was no electricity, no running water. The rations weren't enough to last for 2 weeks also. So there were nights I went to bed with an empty stomach. However, scarcity taught me to be stronger and continue to fight every obstacles that came on my way. So for 18 years, I lived in a refugee camp. We hoped that we will go back to our country. But despite the many bilateral talks between the Bhutanese and Nepalese governments, in those years, we were never get to go home. So in 2008, we were able to apply to resettle in, and eventually was accepted by US to resettle. I'd like to show you all my family picture. The slide is not there. There you go. Perfect. Thank you. So after living for 18 years in the refugee camp, I made my way to Seattle in 2009, followed by my older brother. The rest of the family had to stay in the camp to wait for their own resettlement date. So today marks exactly 11 years that I landed at the SeaTac airport. So it took about 3 years for our parents and other siblings to join us. So God sent many angels to protect me when I first landed here, and many of them were from World Relief Seattle. I landed in the SeaTac airport in the middle of the night. I was told to exit, follow the exit sign and get out of the airport when I reached my destination. They told me there will be someone who will pick you up from there. And I followed the instruction. So as I was exiting from the airport, I saw this lady who looked very friendly walking towards me. And she rushed towards me and introduced herself as my caseworker. So I can't even imagine what would have happened if she was not there, if World Relief was not there to receive me. I would have lost. So after that, she picked me from the airport. She took me to the apartment, which was already set up by World Relief staff before even I arrived here. She showed me how to use an oven, how to adjust the hot and cold water in a faucet, and also how to adjust the heater and to even flush the toilet. I have never seen in my life both hot and cold water coming out from the same faucet. She handed me the key of the apartment that night, and then she left. She arrived the very next day and took me to apply for the documents. And that wasn't the last day that she helped me. She walked side by side with me for about 6 months to make sure that I have everything that I needed to start the life here. The trust that she showed me for me at that time and for that many months that I walked with her was a life learning lesson for me. It helped me to believe in myself and to start a life in a new country, in this country. The second angel, like you all to know, it was my English teacher at World Relief. Besides teaching English, he also taught us how to acclimate to a new culture quickly. So once a week, he used to turn the English class into a golf driving range. That's where I learned to shoot the golf ball in a vase for the first time in my life. Third angel was my job coach. She called me in her office while I was attending English class for about a month. She helped me to create a resume and told me about a job at the SeaTac airport. She explained me about the job requirement and asked me if I'm interested. And I was ready to start working, and I said, yes, I want to apply for the job. And then she asked me, do you know how to use a computer? And I told her I know a little bit. And she just got up from her chair and then told me, okay, sit here. So I was a little bit hesitant. It's culturally inappropriate for me, that's what I learned from my parents and my, forefathers, that we're not allowed to sit in someone's chair, even if they are older or someone who is from higher rank. So I was a bit hesitant, but I didn't deny. So I sat on the chair. She opened the website in the computer and gave me instruction and a paper to follow to fill an application. And then she left to take another client to a job interview. I think it took about 3 hours to complete the application, but I felt empowered and supported to achieve my goal. So after going through the interview process, I was able to get the job. And that's what we do at World Relief here. We empower our participant. We walk alongside to make sure that they have a job that helps them to provide their families before their programs end. The programs they are in when they're newly arrived are very short programs. They have to either get a job by 4 months to be self-sufficient, to be able to provide for their family, or they have about 8 months to a year. So federal funding is so limited for refugees for first arriving in the US. So it's very difficult for them to pay rent and utility bills. So the job is the only option for them to be a self-sufficient. So my other angels were donors, volunteers, and church partners like you all. So without your all help and support, I wouldn't be standing here in front of you today. So now as Chitra mentioned, that now I manage our World Relief Seattle employment team and get to walk alongside our newly arrived refugees and immigrants, refugees, asylees, the Sivs that we help out here, navigating their first job in the US. And that has been a blessing, a therapeutic for me to walk alongside with them to go through the process that I have been when I came to this country as a new refugee here. Thank you. I will pass the mic to Chitra.
So many of you probably, as you're listening to Santa, are wondering, how can I be one of those angels for some of the new folks that are coming in? And so I just want to, the next slide, if you could put it up, please, will give you some ideas of how you can partner with us. Okay, there's many, many ways that you can partner with us. First of all, you can advocate and learn. So you can call your senator or your representative and have a conversation with them. We have advocacy tools on our website, and host a small group. We are doing a lot of things online now, as you all know, and we have something called a house party that you can invite a group of people to come to a house party virtually, and we will come and tell them a little bit about World Relief, and we can advocate together. So those are things that you can do to advocate for refugees. And the other thing you can do is volunteer. Again, I know that many of you, Lauren told us that you're all over Western Washington, and right now there's a lot of folks that need help, especially during the pandemic. And so no matter where you are, we're doing things virtually. And so if you want to tutor a child, you can do that virtually from anywhere you are. We have, so that's the family support role. There are garden work parties. We need a lot of folks to come and pull blackberry bushes and get the soil ready for planting. So those are in-person opportunities. We also need English tutors, so someone that can practice conversation with newly arriving refugees. Then of course you can donate. And there are other ways to donate besides just giving cash. We need welcome kits. As folks arrive, we collect welcome kits and we give that to them when they first get here. And they have things like toothbrushes and deodorant and things that they need immediately when they get here. So your church can assemble welcome kits. We have a list of items that need to go in those. And then the second thing on there is really interesting. The crazy people at World Relief, my colleagues, the younger ones and some of the older ones, on June 19th are doing a century ride. And that means they're going to ride 100 miles for refugees in one day. And usually we do something called See Try Can, where we go from Seattle to Tri-Cities to Spokane on bikes. But this year, due to COVID, you can do a century ride for us and have people sponsor you for that. I'm gonna, since I have a fake knee, I'm gonna do 100 miles on my exercise bike over the course of a couple of weeks. So you can make it however you wanna do it, you can do it. And then finally, you can become a monthly donor. Monthly donors, no matter how small the amount, are huge for us because it gives us month over month, we have something that we can count on. So if you can do $25 a month or $100 a month, monthly donors are huge for World Relief. These last 4 years, they have been our bread and butter and have kept us able to make payroll month after month. And something that's not on here, but something that we really believe in is prayer. We have seen so many miracles over the last 4 years. I've told the young people at our office that if somebody tells you something is impossible, that this thing is not going to happen, it'll never happen, I tell them, don't walk to that thing, but run to that thing, because that's where you're going to see God show up. And we have seen God show up time and time again, because at the heart of Christ are those who are marginalized. At the heart of Christ are the widow, the orphan, and the refugee. And he will never abandon those at his heart. And we have seen him rise up time and time again, to be with them and to walk with them. And so I just encourage all of you to partner with us, or if you can't partner with us, you're too far away, find a place, organization in your community that you can partner with, but get involved, because really it'll transform you more than it'll transform that person that you're walking alongside. It'll transform your heart. So thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Colette, I would love to hear from you. What is one thing that really struck you during that, or one takeaway that you have?
Oh, this has been such a lovely time. Thank you both for sharing, and you're sharing from your hearts, and that's such a beautiful thing. It's always a blessing. And I think I am just struck at how simple it is to make a really big impact on somebody's life. And when I think about Santa stepping off, I just think about any travel I've done where I step off a plane into a different space where I've never been, and how frightening that can be. And just to have a friendly face meeting you, that really touches me. That touches me.
Yeah, you don't have to have all the answers, or just being a friend to talk to somebody, I think, can go a long way. Yeah. We would like to open up the floor for question and answers now. So if you have any questions for these two amazing women, please feel free to drop them in the chat. And the first question that I will give to Chitra is, why is it important to be aware of refugee stories or rights?
Thank you. That's a great question. I think being aware of what's happening in our world is really important, because it might be us that has to flee someday. We don't know what our lives hold. And if we are aware of what's happening in our world and the rights that people have, that immigrants and refugees have or being denied, and we advocate for those, I really think that that's what we're called to do as Christians. I think that's the work of Christ. That's the work of the gospel. That's a calling of the gospel. I think about the life of Christ and what he did when he was here on this earth. He always was aware of those on the margins, and his work on this earth was to bring those folks into the center. And I think as Christians, it's important for us to learn about our world and then to really advocate for those that are on the margins. So that's why I think it's important. Yeah.
Chitra. It's just so inspiring to remember our main motivation is the heart of Christ, like you say, and what we can do. And when we draw close to his work and where his heart is, then we experience him in a new way. So I appreciate that. And I am wondering, Santa, if you could address what one of us, any of us, could do to support immigrants in our own our own church family as a group, because we've talked about some individual ways to support, but as a group, how can we do that?
Sure, yeah, thank you for the question. Befriend them. That's one thing I felt very welcomed, and I felt friendliness around the people that I get to meet here was the one thing that I felt like I belong to this community. Be their voice. The one of the things that refugees and immigrants lost their voices, where their voices are suppressed for many, many years. Myself, my voice was suppressed for 18 years. And to speak up for yourself, to stand up again, to bring that voice back again is very challenging for refugees and immigrants. So be their voices, support them the way that you can, be their helping hands. That's one of the another thing, be their helping. I remember there were families who were from here who stepped up and helped me to move to another apartment, helped me to show the which bus I should be taking to get to work. Be the supporting hand, one of the things that I really encourage you all to do. And then volunteer, as Chitra mentioned, volunteering is the one of the, we're blessed with so many volunteers at World Relief Seattle. They have been helping tutoring our ESL students, helping our participants make resumes, taking them to the job interview. Some of them are helping in capacity in a way that, whatever ways that they can help. So it is very, very helpful for anyone coming into this country to get those type of help. One-on-one help is another best things, and volunteers, cultural competence, World Reliefs are doing that. And finally, I would encourage you to donate whatever, $25, $100, I don't know, whatever is in your capacity or you're capable of doing so. Donate to an organization that supports refugees and immigrants or provide assistance to refugee and immigrants.
Thank you. And Santa, we had a question come in for you that is, do you keep in touch with your family in Bhutan, and have you been able to see them again?
Yes, so I have three aunts there living. One recently passed away. I never got to meet her. Well, she got married and moved away, and I never got to see. But two of my aunts are still in Bhutan. There was a persecution for even from when we were living in the camp. We weren't allowed to talk to them or send letters to them, or if they try to reach us in the refugee camp, they will be either taken to jail, or they will be prosecuted, or they will be expelled from the country. So we didn't get to meet or talk for 18 years. But when we got to in America here, we were able to reconnect with them. And now the government, the king is a different king than the king who expelled many Nepalese origin people in 1990s. So the king right now is more nicer than the king before. So we talk to them now. We chat with them once in a while. So we try our best to connect with them. And one of my aunt has a church there now, so we support them there too.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I have a question for Chitra that's come into the chat, and we're just wanting a little more detail on what is the process to become a volunteer for World Relief and to help immigrant families.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's really easy. You go through an orientation and you go through a background check. And then, yeah, we have really amazing volunteer coordinators that will walk with you and support you as you are volunteering for us. And there's things that are like, as I mentioned, the garden parties, which is just a one-day opportunity. And then there's ongoing opportunities where, like a cultural companion, that's a 6-month commitment. And we'll pair you with a refugee family that you walk with for 6 months. So you can either put your toes into the swimming pool and see if the water is warm, or you can jump into the deep end right off the high dive. We've got all the different levels of commitment that you might want. So just go on our website and look at the volunteer page, and then and jump in. The water is fine. Yeah.
I will also pass this next question to you, which is how does a refugee get in touch with World Relief in the first place? Are they referred by someone or do they reach out to you directly?
Great question. So World Relief is one of 9 VOLAGs, or voluntary agencies, that is supported by the federal government. So there's 9 of us, and most of us are faith-based. So there's Lutheran, Episcopal, Catholic Charities, Jewish. World Relief is non-denominational, and then there's like IRC, which is secular. But the State Department will give us the roster of who's going to be coming to Seattle. And our home office, which is in Baltimore, will get in touch with us. We get a file on each refugee that's coming through. It'll give us some background information about them, what country they're coming from, if they have any medical problems or needs that we need to be aware of. So when we meet them, we can be ready for them, how big the family is, what the ages are. So we get a folder on each refugee that arrives. And so we can be ready for that family when they get here. Now, some folks, they're called SIVs, Special Immigrant Visas, are some folks, and these are folks that work with our troops or with USAID or the State Department overseas. They can come in and walk into our office if they travel themselves. So sometimes folks do walk in and we help them. Also, asylees, people that have gotten asylum, sometimes do walk in and we can help them. But for the most part, it is a very rigorous, it's a 2-year vetting process for refugees. They have to meet with all kinds of folks before they're allowed to come to the United States. And then we have a really robust, information on them before they get here.
Thank you, Kate, for that question. That was a wonderful, lots of good information there. And I want to address Lauren for a minute, because Lauren is not only with Refuge Church, but she is also an employee of World Relief. So I'm going to ask you a little bit about what you do there and what your role is in your involvement.
Yeah, so I am an employee of World Relief Seattle, and I am a caseworker. So I actually do long-term case management. So when people first come into the country, they have a caseworker that takes them through the first 180 days that they're in the country. And then if at that point there is any kind of additional need, maybe domestic violence, or there's a big language barrier or medical needs, anything that would kind of flag to their caseworker that they'd need some extra support, they then come to me and my team, and we can hold them for 6 months, a year, up to 5 years, kind of depending on their need and their assimilation into the country. So that's my role at World Relief.
Thank you. It's so neat to see you bring your avocation, your work, to the church as a ministry as well. That's always a double blessing to all of us.
Yes, and it's been great to be at Refuge Church as well. They were involved with World Relief way before I ever found them, so it's been great to find that partnership with them as well. We have another question for our lovely panelists as well. Santa, I will let you handle this question. What are the biggest needs in the refugee and immigrant community, possibly right now?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Accessing services is one of the biggest need for refugee and immigrant. As you all know, that many of the refugees and asylees, when they first come in here, they don't speak English. So if you don't speak English, you are not able to navigate that process that you have to go. For example, simple thing, applying for a food stamp at the DSHS. You have to go through an application process to be accepted for the food stamp. In similar ways for accessing other type of resources that you need in the community. When we got hit by the COVID, everything got into remote. seen myself and in my Bhutanese community right now, many people are struggling to get access to the services because of their English barriers or for digital literacy barriers that you can see there. So accessing services has been one of the biggest need that I'm seeing in the refugee community right now. And securing work, that's one thing I already mentioned before. It's very, very hard for someone who just got here to get a job. You have to either have a connection or a friend working in a company or your family working in a company. That way you get the job easier and faster. Another thing is everything is remotely. To just fill an application, if you don't have a computer at home, you won't be able to complete that application at all. So that's another barrier, the huge barrier right now. Now they have to compete with the workforce from here, who has already been here, has access to every computers or everything that they need, or educations or skills or work experience from here. But the newly arrived, they don't have those. So they have to compete with the workforce from here. And another thing is transportation. Many of them, as I already mentioned, that they are living in an area where the buses doesn't work properly, or there are no bus lines for them. To learn a bus to go to a doctor's appointment or to go to get a job, it's also a huge step for them to take. When you're a new country, when you're trying to navigate so many things at the same time, and the first thing you have to learn is to take the bus. So I myself experienced taking a bus was one of my worst fear when I got here in 2009. It took me months to get used to taking a bus and be able to pull the string to stop the bus to get off the bus stop. So it's very, very challenging for newly arrived refugees.
Thank you. We're going to ask a question. I'm going to let both of you answer, but we're going to start with Santa. Of what are the misconceptions that you see about the immigrant and refugee community?
So sorry, Chitra trying to answer. Sorry, okay, can hear the echo there. So the misconception about refugees and immigrants, that's one thing. I have been in the places where I was rejected, been in the places where I was not welcomed. The one thing that's happening is we are all humans, and we are judgmental. That's how we are created in some ways. And we love to judge a book without looking inside the book with its cover only. So it's important to look into a life of a refugee and ask question or trying to understand where they come from, how they got here, what are the obstacles or hurdles or they have crossed to be here. And if you understand those things, I think that you will be able to step up for them, be the voice for them. And one thing I really want to let you all know, that people, I felt that they felt that I'm going to harm them as a refugee. But we are not here, refugees are not here to harm you. They are fleeing from getting harmed. So that's a huge difference that you have to understand. So if you understand the backstory of why, how, where, what are the stuff, obstacles, hurdles that they passed, then you will understand them and you will be able to walk alongside them without any questions or any the things that you need to think about.
I just love Santa. Santa, you're amazing. So I would say one of the things we talk about at World Relief is asset-based development as opposed to deficit-based development. And when we meet refugees, we often forget that they had lives before they came here. Many of them were professionals back home. They had huge communities. They left everything, their networks, their community. They come with 2 suitcases. They left everything behind. And yet they come with so much hope and with so much joy. And I love the sounds that I hear coming out of our ESL classes. They are just laughing and there's so much joy spilling out. And I think one of the misconceptions for folks here in the United States about immigrants and refugees is that they think that they're going to be a drain on our society. But the longitudinal data clearly says that they put back so much more into our economy than they ever take out. Also, I think sometimes in the church, we think, oh, we're going to go help these poor people. But really, what we gain in walking with those on the margins is so much greater than what we can ever give them. We talk a lot at World Relief about mutually transformative relationships. And as we walk with others, especially those at the heart of Christ, we find that we are transformed. Our hearts are transformed. The things that we value, and sometimes in the church, the things that we hold up as idols, when we walk with those who have experienced so much pain, those idols start to fall away, and we start to see what's truly important in our faith, and how we need to cling to Jesus. I learned that from my refugee and immigrant friends all the time. They cling to Christ, and boy, don't we need that in our churches today? So yeah, I think there's a lot of misconceptions, but as we are in relationship, that's how those misconceptions can be torn down.
Thank you. I think that's great. It's important to remember that we're all people and we all come from a place, we all have a story, and we're just all at the feet of Jesus.
And just getting to know each other, just the power of connection and friendship and understanding instead of believing everything we might hear or encounter.
Yeah,
Firsthand
absolutely.
knowledge. Beautiful. Amen.
Yeah. We have another question, and I will give this question to Chitra. It says that you mentioned about the recent drop in refugee admission numbers in the last 4 years. With the new administration, how long do you think it will take for admission numbers to increase?
That's a great question. So from everything we're hearing from the new administration, they have put a number out there of 125,000 for their first full year in office. So that is fiscal year 2022, which starts this October. The federal fiscal year is October through September. So this October is when we'll be starting to see some of those refugee arrivals. The administration has said that this year prior, fiscal year 2021, will be spent on rebuilding the infrastructure and really assessing the situation as far as refugees. It's not only infrastructure that's been decimated in the United States, but they call them circuit riders, folks from the State Department that go overseas and conduct the interviews with the United Nations. That system has been decimated as well. So it's going to take some time to build up the infrastructure both here and abroad so we can get the pipeline back in place so we can start to welcome folks. Just really quickly, before I came to this role at World Relief, we were living in India, and I was working for an organization that worked on anti-human trafficking. A lot of the beautiful little girls that I saw in the brothels, in the red light districts in Calcutta, and the boys that I saw in the brick kilns, they were coming from the refugee camps. Because as I said, the time in a camp is so long. For example, for Santa, 18 years. So parents don't see a future for their children. There's no education, there's no books, there's no toys. And so when an auntie or an uncle comes and says, let me take your child to the city and I can find a nice domestic job for them, and I'm going to take 3 or 4 people, 3 or 4 other kids with, so she'll have company. You let them go because there's no other hope. And I tell you, like, every time we get to welcome a child at World Relief Seattle, my heart just sings because it's one other child that we've saved out of harm's way, right? Like, we've been able to welcome them to safety. And so it is a joy to work where we work. And our lobby is just, it's like the United Nations. It's so much fun. Well, it was pre-pandemic. It isn't right now, but we would love to invite you to come partner with us and work with us. And if you have any other questions, feel free to email us with your questions. Thank you.
I would just like to give an opportunity to both Chitra and Santa. If you have any last words that you would like to share, this would be a great time to do that.
Go ahead, Santa.
Okay, no, thank you so much for giving me opportunity to speak with you all, and Chitra to share our stories and share about the work that we do at World Relief. So thank you, and feel free to let us know if you want to know more about our programs that we have here to support newly arrived refugees and immigrants, and we're happy to provide those information to you all.
Yeah, and I just want to say, following Jesus is never easy. It's not convenient. It's not, it requires us to step outside of the temple of our familiar. And that's what makes it so joy-filled, because when we follow hard after him, he always leads us in paths of joy. And so I just encourage you to step out and to take a chance with him and follow him. You'll never be disappointed. Thank you.
Thank you both. That is such a wonderful challenge to us to step out with Christ. And we are always, always happy when we've done that. We can never be disappointed when we're walking with him. So I do thank you for that. And I want to reiterate just a couple of the things that we have learned. I know they have been in the chat box, but if you have any questions and want to move forward with World Relief, to visit their website at worldrelief.org or worldreliefseattle.org. It's on your screen and it's in the chat box as well. Also, if you have any questions that you would like to contact me as well, if you are just questioning how your church can be involved if you're not in one of these arenas, you are always welcome to contact me at the conference office as well. And the email is acswashington@wc.npuc.org. But I have been so blessed to have you and Chitra and Santa, and thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this, Lauren. I've been so impressed with what Refuge Church does and the heart that they have for this work. It is a necessary work. It is a very vital work, and it's just something we are so obviously called to do in the Bible. So I thank you for those, for having us, a larger audience, be part of this. So.
Yes, and I would like to thank you on behalf of Refuge Church for joining. We have enjoyed the conversation, and we hope that you will join our services or possibly just watching us online as well. We stream all of our services, so feel free to find us. We're Refuge Church, so we're on Facebook and Instagram as well. We also have a website. So we look forward to seeing you, and thank you so much for joining our first ever virtual trending topic.
Thank you. Let's say a prayer. It is the end of Sabbath, and this is such a beautiful way, remembering the people that Christ loves so much. And we just want to end it with lifting our hearts to Christ. So please bow your heads with me for prayer. Lord, you are so gracious, and you are so kind, and we thank you for sitting with us and for the picture of your mercy and your grace that we have seen through these stories that we've heard tonight. Thank you for your faithfulness to the World Relief team. Lord, bless them and strengthen their work as they walk alongside those who are vulnerable. We open our minds to the possibilities of how we can do the same. You welcome us as strangers into your kingdom, and we want to be faithful to your calling to do the same to the rest of your children. So let these seeds of ministry fall on fertile soil tonight so that ministry can flourish and grow, Lord. You are our leader in all that we do, and we will follow you. So please impress our hearts with our next actions. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.